I Charlotte. This whole video should just be called Unpopular Opinions from Books and Bargains. Hello, I'm Charlotte and this is Books and Bargains. So welcome back today, and welcome if you're new. I'm Charlotte and I talk about, you may have guessed, books and bargains. Unfortunately at the moment there hasn't been much bargain content because we in the UK are still in lockdown, and I think non-essential shops are opening on the 12th of April, and the first one I visit is going to be a charity shop. However, being stuck in the house has given me a lot of time to read. So in February, I read 14 books and rated them 4-star as average. I read 3 ebooks, 3 audiobooks, and the rest as physical books. In terms of genre, that worked out as 1 YA mystery thriller, 6 non-fiction books, 3 contemporary fiction books, 2 middle grade books, 1 historical fiction book, and 1 that I'm just going to classify as humour because I really don't know how else to rate it. February is a little bit of a weird month for me. I DNF'd 2 books, and I said in my January wrap-up that I wasn't going to include DNFs, but you guys have commented saying that you quite like them, and seeing as these were 2 that I was sent from publishers for part of blog tours, I thought I should probably talk about why I DNF'd them. And in both cases, I think that other people may get recommendations from it, although they weren't quite my thing. My NetGalley percentage in February went up 5% to 49%, so I'm slowly working my way up. But one thing I did want to say about February is that in February, I think I had taken on too many books I had to read. I'd got tours that I should have read earlier in January and put off, and it just meant that, like, I'm looking at the stack of books now, and I did really enjoy a lot of them. Like I said, my average was a 4. I miss the freedom of just being able to pick from my bookshelf. So if you don't already follow me on Instagram, you will not know that in March I'm taking part in the Femathon and the Irish Readathon. I will link videos to both of those things below. And so instead of doing a strict TBR, I have put together a little kind of TBR shelf with loads of different books that would fit the prompts, and I'm going to work my way through them. However, that's not what we're here to talk about today. So let's get into my February wrap up. So the first book that I DNF'd, I am going to say that this one just was badly written. And this was Laurel Cassidy's Walk of Fame. And I was kindly sent this via NetGalley. And it just sounded like it was going to be the perfect book for me to read. However, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way that Laura Cassidy was written, and I just got the feeling that the person writing it had never met a teenage girl before. And so yeah, I DNF'd that one pretty early on. And the next one that I DNF'd, I did get through to 50% of this one, and that was Outlawed by Anna North. Now, I knew going into this that it was a Western, and historically I haven't got on with Westerns. But this was kind of presented to me as a feminist kind of dystopian book. And I did really like the beginning of this. I was really into this and couldn't put it down at first. So we are living in a town where people still believe in witchcraft, and as our main character is married and is struggling to get pregnant, they believe that that must be the work of witches. If somebody has a miscarriage, that must be the work of witches. And the main character's mum is a midwife. And I don't really know what else to say other than the main character ends up embroiled in a situation and ends up running away to join this outlaw society. And I just couldn't keep going with it. The pace was so slow for me that I DNF'd this at about, I think, 40%. However, if you do like Westerns, and this is apparently for fans of The Handmaid's Tale, which I haven't read yet, you may like this one. And the second book that I DNF'd this month, I feel really bad for DNFing this one because so many of my close friends have really loved it. And it's one of those, okay, so it's Iona Bannister's When I Ran Away, and again DNF this at about 40%. And I understand that this is a very important book about postnatal depression, and I think if I'd have been reading this when I was in a better headspace myself, I'd have been able to understand and appreciate it more. But I really didn't like the main character, and I think not being a mother myself, there's a lot of things that I couldn't relate to, and I just didn't like the way this was written, and there was a lot of kind of fat shaming in it, which we all know isn't the one for me. So yeah, DNF that one. So we're on to the books that I finished now, and this is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp, and I say I finished it, I literally DNF'd this about 10% from the end because I was just like, I do not care how this finishes. And again, this is one that everybody has seemed to love. Basically, right at the beginning, our main character, Nora, is involved in a bank robbery and is taken hostage with her girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend, and this just had no pace for me. Most of the story happens over one day anyway, and I wanted to love it, and I just didn't. One thing that I did love about this book is that Nora's girlfriend, whose name I can't remember, has endometriosis and wears like 50 style dresses and things. And I felt very seen in that character. She was me. But apart from that, I think the thing is, I really loved Karen McManus's One of Us is Lying and One of Us is Next. So whenever a book, and this one says, you know, the must-read psychological thriller for fans of One of Us is Lying, I have really high expectations going into it, and it didn't have that. And yeah, I don't think it was anything like One of Us is Lying. I don't think it's the same. One of Us is Lying is definitely a YA genre, and I thought some of the descriptions in this and some of the trauma were a bit more adult. So yeah, I gave that one a 2-star in the end. So the one and only book that I gave a 3-star to this month is Hungry by Grace Dent. Now this book, I would say from about halfway through to the end, it was definitely a 4-star, but the beginning really dragged from me. I think that I could see what Grace was trying to do, and I always feel bad like criticising somebody's life story, but I think Grace was trying to talk about how different food was when she was growing up, and I think I was a little bit too young. Once she got to the kind of 90s and was talking about some of the things that you got in the 90s, I definitely switched on a bit more. And then once she got to the point where she'd left her small town and gone to London, which is something I always wanted to do, but I left my small town and went to Leicester, which isn't quite London, but there we have it. When she talks about that, I got really engrossed in the story, and I would have loved the second half of this book to have been more fleshed out. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about it. I really struggle to talk about memoirs and things. I got this from Readers First. If you're not already signed up to Readers First, there's a link below where we'll both get points and you can get books for free. And that's about all I can say about it, really. So that one was 3 stars. So on to the bulk of my reviews now, my 4 stars. And the first one I'm going to talk to you about is Bedtime Stories for Worried Liberals. This was a Christmas present, and this is just a little book of classic fairy tales retold for millennials. And this made me laugh. There were a few that made me quite angry, but then when I saw where it was going, it made me laugh. There is Bojo Locks and the Three Bears, which was a personal favourite of mine. The Optician of Barnard Castle. The Very Trendy Caterpillar. And so me and Tom read one of these together every night for a few weeks and really enjoyed laughing at them. I think you've got to appreciate a kind of dark, sarcastic humour to like this one, and I think it's very British. So yeah. Another one that I read for a blog tour and really enjoyed was Space Hopper by Helen Fisher. Now, this is definitely at the higher end of a 4-star, and for a debut novel, this book was bloody beautiful. Let me insert the final cover because this is my art copy, and I requested this on NetGalley. I had a copy on NetGalley because of this cover, and then when I was asked if I wanted to be in the tour, I was like, yes, why not? So I was sent the proof. Anyway, I didn't read anything about this. Just looked at the cover and was like, yeah, that's going to be a YA. I'll love that. And it's not. This is an adult contemporary fiction. And I don't really want to tell you too much about it. It does have elements of time travel in it. It has really good disability rep in her best friend who is blind, and it's a story about mothers and daughters. But had I known that before I read it, I probably wouldn't have read it, and I'm so glad that I did. Like I said, I don't want to tell you too much about it, just read it. I think you'll need content warnings for grief, especially in this one, but if you want to know any more about it, then get in touch with me. But it's one of those that I think if you like time travel, then you should get into it. So a quick little read that I read this month was Jen Campbell's Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops. And this came from the Birthday Book Club, and it came on a day I was having a really crappy day. And I picked it up and read it cover to cover. Like I say, it's a tiny little book. And it was just so funny. Like, a lot of the comments in it, I was just like, yeah. And you don't necessarily have to work in a bookshop, just working with people, you can understand why some of these things make me roll my eyes and make me laugh. The next book that I read this month is actually a graphic novel that I read on NetGalley. And as you can probably appreciate, I don't think that when you read a graphic novel via NetGalley or via ebook form, you really get the full kind of experience from it. So this is one that I will be looking to pick up in paper form, and that is 2 Week Wait. And this is a graphic novel all about the experience of going through IVF, which again, as someone who can't have children, I didn't think it would be something I'd enjoy, but I thought as it's graphic novel form, I'll go for it. If you don't already know, I'm adopted, and my mum and dad went through, I think, 3 unsuccessful rounds of IVF before having me. And reading this book, I really I understood a lot of the things that they went through, felt the emotions. Like, obviously I can never fully feel it, I can never understand what it's like to be so desperate for a child. I've said before, I like reading books that aren't my experience to try and at least have some kind of empathy for people that are going through it. And yeah, I think that was a really worthwhile read. I also read this month The New Fashion Rules by Victoria McGrath. Now, if you don't follow Victoria, she is in the fro, and she is one of the first bloggers and YouTubers that I religiously followed, and to this day she's one that I still follow. I've kind of outgrown quite a few like that I used to love. Either they've had babies and become parenting bloggers, or you know, I'm not the right audience anymore. But despite Victoria having a completely different fashion sense to me and being a fan of the luxury high-end stuff, I've always really enjoyed her content. And this book, I kind of picked it up because it was her, but actually it was a really interesting read about how technology can help and hinder fashion and Instagram and things like that. She also wrote about body positivity and exclusivity in here. This again would be quite a high 4-star, apart from there's a whole section about fitness blogging and the wellness industry, and in that she doesn't include any diverse bloggers, and I think it's almost the last kind of taboo in blogging that fitness bloggers are all thin. And it really annoys me because I think we need to be encouraging girls and women especially, and men to an extent, but to move our bodies because it feels good. I don't know about you, but I've always been brought up in like exercise equals calories burn, and it's just such a negative mindset to be in. I do have a few books about this that I'm planning to read soon, but yeah. So I didn't like that was left out of this, but generally the book as a whole was pretty good. I then read via NetGalley Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which is the final book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, and this took me ages to read just because I didn't want to let the sisters go. I just didn't want the trilogy to finish. If you haven't already read it, I say trilogy, they're more like companion novels. I don't think it really matters what order you read them in, but I read them in order, and I made Victoria read them too, and I hope that she is going to read Eve Brown the minute it comes out because I want to discuss it with her. However, I loved Eve Brown. I think I find it really hard now to compare the 3 sisters. I gave this one a 4-star along with Chloe Brown, and Danny Brown I gave a 5-star. But I think out of the sisters, I think Eve was my absolute favourite. She is so much like me. Just a lot of the things that she said and did and her clumsiness just made me think of me. I think the sex scenes in this one were the most... I don't even know what to say. The sex scenes in this one were probably the dirtiest, but best. It is so sex positive, this series, that as long as you can cope with the smut, because it is an 18+ book, I would say get this trilogy on your radar. Another book tour that I was on this month was Caroline Bishop's The Other Daughter. Now, throughout this, I was going to give this a 3-star. This is a dual perspective from a daughter whose mother has passed away, and she has found out a secret and wants to go back into her mother's past. It is also told from the mother's point of view in the past, who is in the 70s, who is fighting for women's liberation rights when she gets pregnant. And the mother's story in this is totally a 5-star. I absolutely loved it. However, the daughter, she acted like a teenage brat a lot of the time, and I think if she'd have been a teenager in this, I would have let that go. But a lot of the things she said and did, I just couldn't get on board with. However, the payoff was worth it in the end. It is definitely worth reading this book, and I gave that a 4-star. And lastly, in my 4 stars this month, I have 2 audiobooks that I listened to. The first of these I listened to was Mary Portas' Work Like a Woman. I love Mary Portas, and I don't know if you ever saw Mary, Queen of Charity Shops, but I think what she did for charity retail is just amazing. Her Mary's Living and Giving shops in London are immaculate and are some of the bougiest charity shops I've ever visited. Fingers crossed I'm going to be visiting one in September, so I'll hopefully vlog that for you. And this is her 2nd book, I believe, maybe 3rd, but I listened to her memoir Shop Girl, which was brilliant, and I always love listening to people tell their own stories because it just brings that extra something to it. Like through this story, when Mary laughs, you can't help but laugh along with her. And in this book, she talks about her personal life, and she also talks about her work life and how we as women can not work in the alpha way that men do and actually work like a woman and make that work for us. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I would definitely give that a listen to. And the other audiobook I finished listening to just last night, so just in the nick of time to get it into this video, and that is the audiobook of The Story of Tracy Beaker. And I put that on because I was feeling a bit down and I just wanted to listen to something that would make me smile. And although it did make me smile at some points because it was that kind of nostalgia of Tracy Beaker, I actually just felt really sad for this child. And I definitely didn't, I think I must have read Tracy Beaker when I was about 8 or 9, so 20 odd years ago. And I never remember feeling so heart-wrenching, but I don't know if it's just because now as an adult I can just see that this child just wants to be loved, and all the things that she's going through, I just wanted to reach into the book and give her a massive hug. And yeah, can't really say much out about that. I am now just waiting for my library to have the Dare game because I am going to carry on with the Tracy Beaker series. And then the last 3 books are all 5 stars, and I would say I'm going to put these in order, but I just don't know what order they'll be in. So I'll start with the 2 that I don't physically have with me. And the first of these is How to Break Up with Fast Fashion. And I again listened to this on audiobook. I listened to this as kind of research because I wanted to make a video when the charity shops reopen, trying to encourage you, if you don't already, to shop in charity shops. And I thought I didn't want to recommend the book without listening to it myself, but it just completely blew me out of the water and went above and beyond all my expectations, because it was just such a fantastic book. And even for someone who has been a die-hard charity shopper for as long as I have, it was kind of nice to be reiterated about why I'm doing it and the people behind it, and to hear about the activism that I could get involved in. It was also really good in talking about how some of the sustainable fashion movement is quite elitist, that, you know, not everybody can spend £50 on a t-shirt. It also, I find a lot of people that talk about either charity shopping or sustainable fashion talk a lot about capsule wardrobes, and that's just not me. Whereas the author of this book, I think it's Lauren Bravo, kind of said whichever way you do it, you do you. And she was talking about how if we try and expect people to be perfect, people will give up more easily. So if we could get the majority of the population being sustainable imperfectly, then that would be so much better than trying to only have a few people that do it perfectly. So yeah, that was a 5-star. And then the second one I read via NetGalley, and I do have a physical copy on its way to me, because this is definitely going to be in my top 10 of the year, and I had to have my own copy. And that is Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow. And this book, I have said before in my videos that I think middle grade books are exactly where we need to be pinpointing a lot of diversity. I think at that age, kids are more willing to accept stuff, and they haven't, hopefully, learnt too much negativity by then. And so this book follows our main character, who overhears that his mum and dad talking. His mum and dad have split up, and he overhears his dad trying to decide how to tell him that he's gay. And him and his friends decide to do something to learn more about it. And I feel like everyone on the internet, people have said what it is they do, but because it doesn't happen till kind of halfway through the book, I don't want to spoiler it if you don't want it spoiled. So yeah, they go on this adventure, and it's just, they meet such a diverse cast of characters. I really don't know what else to say other than it is such a lovely book, and I think all children should read it. It's one of those books that I think should be on the curriculum. And last but by no means least, is a book that I agreed to the blog tour of just because it was a book that was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I didn't expect to fall in love with it as much as it did. And that is The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien-Charles. And this book is set in Paris during the Second World War. It starts before the war breaks out, but the majority is set during the war. And this is from multiple perspectives again, and it is also from Odalie as a young girl working at the American Library in Paris, all the way through to her as an older woman living in the States in a small village that knows her as the war bride. And she meets her next door neighbour in modern times, and they form this friendship, and the book goes back and forward between these. And I think on the surface, the biggest thing about this book is that it is just about how important books and libraries are, but it's so much more. There is so many themes running through this of like camaraderie and grief and trauma and making mistakes, and all of those things just combine to make this a fantastic read. This again is definitely going to be in my top 10 of the year. I'm even thinking about putting this in first place, but I think it's just going to go into second by like hair splitting decision. So there we have it. That is all the books that I read in February. I do have some quite interesting videos planned this month, if I may say so myself, but I'm just waiting on a few things to arrive. And when you are watching this, I yesterday would have had a gastroscopy. So I presume right now I am lying in bed feeling sorry for myself, but hopefully I'll be back with a video on Sunday. And until then, remember that my DMs are always open on my Instagram, and look after yourselves. Bye.